I'm joined this morning with Michael Griggs, and he is the Military Services and Reporting Specialist Records here at the Office of Records Registration and Veterans Affairs. Thank you and welcome. Good morning, Michael.
Morning.
And I also have, and I should have asked you this, Paula, and that's just me being Latina. That your last name, Rojas, and I was like, I should have checked with you, Paula, and I apologize, I didn't before we went live. But she's the president of the Student Veteran Organization. So welcome, and thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
me. And I want to start this conversation by just getting to know you guys a little bit, just getting to find out a little bit about yourself. We can start with you, Michael, and what inspired you to serve, and what inspired you to then come and work at HCC in the Office of Veteran Affairs.
Okay, what inspired me to serve? Um, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to catch a lot of grief from Paula Rojas because we go back and forth about this whole Navy and Air Force thing.
Air
In
Force.
high school, I always had this dream of being in the Air Force. If not the first baseman for the Baltimore Orioles, I was going to join the military and be in the Air Force because I figured Air Force airplanes. There was something I was interested in. Well, a Navy recruiter got a hold of me first. A good friend of mine gave my information to a Navy recruiter. I sat down with the recruiter and was very impressed by him. And so the Air Force kind of went out the window, and it turned out to be a very no disrespect to him, but it turned out to be a very good choice for me. I served in the military for 21 plus years, from election day 1988 to the end of July 2010. And in that time, I served 4 tours in Japan, um, one tour at a now decommissioned duty station in Kamasaya, and 3 tours at Yokosuka, where all the Navy ships for the Seventh Fleet, or most of them, are stationed. Also, Rota, Spain. I did 2 tours in Rota, Spain as a flyer with the VQ Squadron. And I did 1 tour in Colorado. And yes, there are Navy people in Colorado. It was a joint service. I was a cryptologic technician, so it was all intel type stuff. So it was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. So I did that. Like I said, 21 years, and after retirement, I I used my post 9/11 GI Bill benefit to attain a bachelor's degree. I started on it in 2010. 2011, I joined Howard Community College as a registration assistant. And, I was there for a little while figuring, and this is what my goal was, or where I thought I was going to go. Because in the military, if you're in intel, you always have it in your head, okay, I'll do this when I get out of the military. I'm just going to flow right into. No, that wasn't in the cards for me personally. So I was here at Howard Community College as a registration assistant for a while I was, figuring the rest of my life out. First it was, IT type of stuff. I got a degree, Bachelor's of Science in business with a concentration on information systems. That was my degree. So just a little bit more time here at Howard Community College, trying to figure other things out after, getting the degree. Fast forward to 2017, and this opportunity opens up. The opportunity to come and do a job that I admired from that front position. I would see folks go by, and at the time, Victoria Cardoni and then Jay Gonzalez were the military reps in the position that I currently hold. And I was kind of envious because I'd sit there and talk to the military folks before they went to the back to speak to Victoria and Jay and some other folks that work here. Like, man, I'd like to do that, just to help people. And I think I've landed in the right job here as a military specialist, as a liaison between the military and the VA. I've had similar experiences to them, so here I am. I've been in this particular position since October of 2017.
Thank you for sharing your story, and I love that you were kind of like figuring things out as you
Yeah.
were going, and just kind of like saying, okay, I did this for a long time now. I want to help. I want to give back. Um, you had already done enough when you were serving, and then to come and continue to do with that same spirit, I really appreciate that. Paula, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to go in the Air Force.
Thank you. So I'm, like she said, I'm Paula Rojas. I served in the Air Force for 20 years. I'm married to a firefighter here in Montgomery County, and we have a beautiful 2-year-old. Um, so growing up, I didn't have the best of opportunities. At one point, I was actually living in my car in a truck stop parking lot. Also was getting wrapped up in the wrong crowds. But luckily, thanks to my junior ROTC instructors and Cherie Ham, I joined the Air Force, and it was the greatest decision I could have ever done. Um, so had the opportunity growing up in school, had the opportunity to read about, like the Champs-Elysees, the Eiffel Tower, Anne Frank, just so many different things about our history. And I'm like, why do I have to learn this? I'm never going to get to experience this. And because of the Air Force, I was actually able to walk up the steps of Anne Frank's home, walk down the Champs-Elysees and learn more about it, and actually the energy, and go to the Roman Colosseum and hear and see I just would have never experienced any of that if it hadn't been for my choice to join the Air Force. And like Michael, sorry, I actually wanted to go Marines. But unfortunately, the Marine recruiter, when I walked in to talk to him, granted, I had Air Force junior ROTC instructors as well. So they're kind of like, what are you thinking? So when I walked in to talk to the Marine recruiter, he just flat out told me, we don't have jobs for girls. And that happened in like 98. Because
Wow.
I joined in 1997. I was a junior in high school, and I left a month and 6 days after I graduated in 1998. So that's kind of stuff was still going on. The Air Force actually gave me an opportunity, based not on my sexism or anything like that, but because of my background that I had previously mentioned. I got like a probationary term to, as long as I kept my nose clean, I was able to join the Air Force.
Wow, that's so interesting. There's a couple things and there's a couple places that I could take this conversation. It's fascinating to know that you guys kind of like cross paths there. You were going for the other one and ended up in each other's force. There's two things though that it's funny when we first started, you said, Marines, and you were like, Air Force is that rivalry that we see, is that just like a friendly kind of thing? Is like a tease in between the different branches?
For the most
I've
part,
always found it.
yes. For the most part, very much. We poke, like Mike and I go back and forth, Navy, Air Force, and then when we have our office hours, sometimes, some of the other, we have an Army guy, Donovan Waters, who is our communications officer. And then, we have a Marine that's our treasurer. And we have other people that just come in, and we just go back and forth, and it's very friendly. It's a part of the camaraderie and the brother and sisterhood that we have. Just like brothers and sisters in a house, they're going to pick on each other. And that's what we do when we get together as well.
Great. And then the other thing that you brought up is women in, in, in the armed forces. Are you finding that, from that initial conversation that is changing, that there is more opportunity for women now in the different branches? And what was your experience like? And have you seen that transition?
Most definitely. I think there's a huge change. Not only that, the women that I grew up around, the mentorship that I received, we're more vocal. We're more willing to stand up, and say the right things and do the right things, and not just be like, oh, he's a guy, whatever. However the mentality used to be, women are much more stronger, and we're much more vocal, and we're not afraid to, stand up and fight for what's right. And because of that, the other females previous to me, I was actually able to serve in an actual combat role. I did 3 tours in Iraq on convoys, and being a combat vet, that's something that I'm extremely proud of.
Absolutely, as you should. Michael, what was your experience, with female I guess soldiers. I don't know what the right word is, and I apologize for that. What would be the right word
Sailor,
to
sailor.
refer to, right? But how was your experience? How did you see that, and what was your perspective as a male, um, you know, uh, counterpart there, I guess.
Well, as I said, went into the Navy in 1988. It was 32 years ago. It's a little bit different than it is now. Paula spoke about how ladies are more vocal now. I think we've evolved as a nation, and it's just back then. Goodness, I sound old now. Back then,
You are.
I mean, quiet. It was a little bit different. I was coming out of an era where even the stories that I heard about the 70s and the 80s from ladies from other people of color serving, just the experiences that they had made my mouth dry. I was like, yo, really? And then, to hear that in 1998, Paula, had that experience with the Marine, that they didn't have positions for girls, you said, Paula?
Girls, not even the women, girls.
That's still, I mean, 1998, not too far removed from the 70s, 80s, from 88 when I joined, but it's still surprising to hear that, that she experienced that. But, we've evolved, and, ladies are a lot more vocal. I think the nation is starting to accept more diversity. And I've seen that. I grew up in the intel field, and as a flyer, for instance, when I went to Spain for the first time, there were not a lot of Black people flying. So, to see that change from 92 to 95 was my first tour, more of an integration. And by the time 98 came through, it was like, it wasn't an uncommon thing to see, people of color, flying in as pilots, as evaluators on planes and things like that. So just seeing the evolution was it's good. It's a good thing, and I saw a lot of that. A change in technology, computers, email, and all that. I came up with that, like in '98. But I think by the time Paula got to the military, email was starting to be. Before that, we wrote letters, handwritten letters, things of that nature. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have like FaceTime on computers. Computers were cool, but we didn't have cameras and the things that we have now. And, even when I retired, we had Skype, but, just there was a big difference in the way we communicated. I mean, now I think it's more advantageous for kids going into the military, because things that they do now and things that we did in '88, you got a phone call every now and then. You waited for like the handwritten letter from home, from your family, from your friends, things like that. Pictures from home. It wasn't an instant, okay, sir, can I go on the computer and oh yeah, there's pictures of my people. It's just a little different with regard to that. And the military, the attitude is changed for the better. There's still people that people are people. They're going to be who they are, depending on where they're from, what type of family they're from, this and that. But overall, it's changed. Nothing for the better. It is changing for the better.
And I think that reflects, our society as a whole, and I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for that change, and I'm really glad to hear that definitely the armed forces are also, taking part of that change, and being like you said, more inclusive, more diverse. As that's just going to add and make it even stronger, in my opinion.
Right.
So what is the main goal of the Office of Veterans Affairs office here at Howard Community College?
Main goal is to take care of veterans. With benefits and other things. Sometimes we get a little more personal than just, okay, let me get your paperwork and send it off to the VA. But it's to take care of veterans and veteran families, military affiliates. So I might speak to a veteran like Paula. I might speak to a veteran's child who is using benefits to take classes here. So our goal is to take care of military affiliates.
So
with regard primarily to the benefits, but it's a little more.
And I really want to go into that. I really want to understand that because just through the very, very tiny experience that I had, right? I was able to realize that the type of support that's needed, not just for the person who's joining, but for the family. Because if I would have signed that contract, I would have been away from my family, right? I would have not been able to support my family in the way that I do on a daily basis. So help us understand that, please, Michael, in how HEC looks at at the veteran who's come back, at the family who's here maybe while somebody's deployed. And you just said, it's not just about the benefit, it's not just about the paperwork.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
more than that. So I really want you to paint that picture and help us really understand what that really means.
Okay, I need an example. Okay, the veteran coming back from the military, or okay, all right. I'll use Paula as an example. How about that? Okay, she comes into my office. It is her first time using benefits. Okay, I find out what benefit she's using. She's got a bunch of questions, and I understand this because when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I went in eyes this big, trying to figure out what I was going to do, who to talk to, what I need to, how do I need to interact with the VA, all of that. So they come in, they have the questions. I do my best. We do our best. There's another VA rep here. We do our best to answer the questions of the veterans, and overload them with information. Really, it's they'll sit down and we'll give them as much as we can because we want them to know, we want them to feel comfortable in this environment because you have enough to take care of as a veteran coming out of the military, wondering, where you're going to get your next job from, wondering how you're going to feed your family. I understand that big time. It's like, well, okay, I'm out here, I'm in Colombia, I got my wife and my child, shout out to them, and I didn't give them that proper respect early. My wife and my daughter, 16-year-old, we move into a house in Colombia, and I remember we don't have our furniture. My daughter's laying on a one of those air mattresses. I'm like, wow, I got to take care of her and my wife, and how am I going to do that? So immediately, I went to one of the colleges here, started the whole process, and coming out, I didn't know what to expect. Did I have to do this with the VA? What is the process of college? Because I never intended to go to college when I went to the military. No, and that's what we do. We provide that comfort, if you will. I guess Paul can speak on that later, if you ask her that question, but okay, we're here for you. We're going to help you get through this process and that process. So for the military veteran, that's what we provide for them, or we try to provide that for them. Just the information of, okay, this is what you need to do. This is who you need to speak to, and it's going to be fine. Calm down. We got your back. That type of thing. And did you mention the military family, the support? Okay. Well, it's about the same with the military families. They use benefits as well from the VA, and that's why a lot of them are here in this office, because they're using benefits. Some of them it's just, okay, mom or dad was in the military. What can you do for me? And there are things, we may talk about that later, that we can provide for them here in the college that they can take advantage of, our lounge, just being a military affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
So with
Yeah.
benefits, as far as the deploying parent or the deploying veteran, we try to help them out in a way that, they get called away at any time sometimes. It's like, okay, I plan on leaving in January. I was supposed to go TAD or TDY, which is temporary duty, in January. However, I have these orders right here. I'm leaving tomorrow. What can you do for me? Try to smooth that process out, because in military, it happens all the time. So yeah, we just let them know that we'll do what we can to take care of them. The school is really, really good about helping the veteran out with a situation like that. It's not, oh, well, hey, you paid for it. It's okay. We understand your situation, and we're going to help you get through it.
I really appreciate that, how you painted that picture of, because I think we have this idea, this perceived idea, and maybe the wrong idea, that once you come out of the military, you're set, right? You have everything that you need, and
She would laugh.
good,
Yeah.
right? I think that
Yeah.
that's the idea that we have as a society, and I really really appreciate it, and thank you
Mhm.
for helping us just bust that idea and bust that myth, and understand that really that's a time where our veterans need a lot of support, because not only they're coming back. I mean, you said find a job. I was like, when you said that, I was like, whoa, but they had a career, so isn't that like retirement? Shouldn't those be the golden days? Right, like that's the idea that we have.
We're
um
retired, but I mean, it's not like a full, you have to work.
Yeah.
You can't just, or yeah, I'm retired, I get a retirement. No, 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 no. You got a family to take care of. You still have to work. And it's not set in stone like some of us either believe or are led to believe. No disrespect to anybody who said, okay, this is what it's going to be like, but everybody's different. You know, every situation is different.
mhm.
And so it's not always about you and what you think is going to happen, really.
So now, thank you for bringing that awareness. I think it's
Yeah,
important for people to understand that.
yeah.
Paula, talk to us about your process. I mean, we just heard from Michael and what they do at the office, but talk to us about your process when you were in that situation, when you came into the office as a student and said, I just came back, I retired, I want to further my career. Um, what difference did it make to you to have that specific office, and how did it help you to navigate, and what benefits did you get from having one specific office here at Howard Community College that understood your needs, that understood your situation, beyond just the academics, beyond just the regular admissions process, but that saw you as a veteran and understood that all of the challenges, all of the the things that came with being a veteran.
Yeah. So I had been retired for a little over or just coming up on a year when I got approved to go to to go to college through a program with the Department of Veteran Affairs called vocational rehab, which is different. Most people hear the GI Bill or Montgomery post 9/11 GI Bill, stuff like that. Voc rehab is another opportunity that the VA provides for people that qualify to get a degree. Because so for my personal experience, what the training that I got in the military, I can't do in the outside because of disabilities. So because I have those disabilities, they're sending me to school so that I can get the education for a new vocation. So coming into, I'm kind of barely understand that because in the military, they don't really talk about vocational rehab a lot. So learning the ins and outs of that. And then the military, we're full of acronyms. We have our own lingo. So like I'm coming in to this, like, I don't know the academic lingo. Like, what does that mean? What does this mean? So I come into Mike. Mike understands exactly where I'm at. He understands the acronyms, and then he's able to break it down like the hierarchy. These people do this, these people do that. So he's able to relate it to a way that a military member can understand. And then because of all the questions that I had, he was able to point me in the right direction, like to the advisors. I was fortunate to work with, and still fortunate to work with, Miss Diane in the Allied Health advisors team. She has been phenomenal at keeping me squared away, keeping me from pinging. And then also, he was a prior Step Up coach, and he informed me about the Step Up program. And I also have a Step Up coach that helps me as well. So it's not him just processing my paperwork to, get me wherever I need to go, but they also work with finance. We have what we call a promissory note because the VA takes forever to pay. So they work with finance to be able to hold our spots. And having that comfort and knowing that somebody's there advocating for us and taking care of us, uh, it's been amazing. It's been for me, a very easy transition.
That's wonderful to hear. Michael, you kind of just said briefly earlier that we could talk a little more in depth about those specific benefits that HCC offers the students. Could we go into some of those right now?
Okay, well, some of the benefits here at the college. Um, cohort registration, a week early. We started registration on the 10th, that was yesterday, for the general population, if I'm using the right term. For cohorts like military affiliates, it was a week early. It was on the 3rd. So that's one benefit. They could choose their classes before the other students. We have groups like the Student Veteran Organization. Paula's the president of that, and I think you already mentioned that. Does an outstanding job. This is a crazy time right now, and to have somebody as motivated as her in this time is kind of, I feel bad for her, really, because you want the camaraderie, and you want the the togetherness of having the students get together and do things, but because of the pandemic, it's just unfortunate. We have a veterans lounge. We have 4 computers set up in the lounge where students can go and just, hang out with other military affiliates, military members. We have things like, there's a map in the lounge, we have little push pins. Okay, I've been stationed here, that type of thing. They'll, talk with each other, or they'll study, it's respectable. People studying and try to be as quiet as possible. Paula helped us out. She put a note on the door, on our board. Hey, if you're taking a phone call, please step outside, that type of thing. That's the type of leadership I'm talking about. She's the president, and she just kind of, just that presence, that type of thing. There's like a TV in the lounge that, it's there. People can look at it, but, between classes, if, later in the day, they have access to that printer, that type of thing. And whatever's coming down the pike for students, veteran students, when we hear about it, we pass it on to the students.
It sounds like being able to connect with other veterans or other people who understand it and come from that same background. It's really, really important. And, having not experienced ever military life, I continue to hear. There's books, there's poems, there's where it's like a brotherhood that is formed in the armed forces. Can you guys talk about that and maybe how that has impacted your life, or the change, or just stories, maybe personal stories that you guys can share of what that spirit really means and how it comes to life for anybody who is maybe actively or as a veteran who has served, which is really in the armed forces?
So for me, the whole transition out of the military, yes, I miss the military, and I miss, the craziness, all the deployment opportunities and stuff like that. But for the most part, I miss the people. There are people, William Sanders, Renee Lewis, Joe Starner, Bryant Young, like people that I don't talk to every day, but I think about them constantly. I think about them every day. And then we like to be around like-minded people. We kind of think alike, not 100%, but we kind of think alike, we vibe alike. It's almost like when you're around another veteran, you can relax. You don't have to be like on eggshells, and, you got to get to know each other. But for the most part, you can relax more than, talking to someone else. And then once you're in a class and you find out there's other veterans, next thing you know, we're kind of clumped up and we're in the back of the corner. The back of the classroom. It's like we come together, we enjoy each other's in each other's presence, and then we actually understand what everyone's going through. We understand PTSD, we understand disabilities, we understand the issues going on with the VA and deployments. There's some active duty that are, at HCC serving right now. And I had the pleasure of talking to one not too long ago, before COVID, in the lounge, and they're going to be their first deployment. So being able to sit there and explain and talk to them and give them some more reassurance that it's going to be okay, give them some tips like, hey, pack your bag this way, that way, And then also being able to talk to some of the, we call them dependents, family members, spouses. There's a female spouse that we were talking with not too long ago. how she was dealing with deployment and 4 kids and going to school. And I was just like, I was blown away, because it's not just the military members that serve, our families also serve. You know, they go through the sacrifices like we do. You know, they're at home dealing with, they're being mom and dad and, you know, coach and nurse and, you know, all of those different hats that parents wear. They're wearing their spouse's hat as well, while that spouse is also downrange or separated, missing the birthdays, missing tuck-ins, missing the goodnight kiss and all of that. So just being around like-minded people that have been through a lot of the exact same things, it's comforting. And I guess that's the best way I can explain it.
You know, I guess maybe what we can actually kind of put together is, you know, the camaraderie is, it's a beautiful thing that comes from it. But it's also, you know, Paula, just hearing you, there's a lot of lessons also. There's a lot of things
Yes.
that you bring back with you from all those experiences that you can then incorporate, that don't just apply where you're in the armed forces, but you can incorporate into your life and teach others. So I guess we can follow up with what are some of those biggest lessons that maybe you guys have brought back with you and are able to share with everybody.
Okay. Well, first about the camaraderie and the friendships and all that in the military. 2 nights ago, I spoke to somebody I was stationed with 20 years ago. We had a 2-hour conversation, and I don't know. In the last couple of months, we've been doing this because, you know, he's married and has kids. I'm married and I have kids, and you know, we knew each other as flyers. Okay, we went in the same shop. We hung out together. We went, you know, partied a little bit together. And we just had that experience, but now we're grown men and we have families. And I mean, I was talking to him about, you know, maybe putting together a podcast. We went into, you know, so many different things. And I have friends like that in the military that, like Paul said, you don't talk to them every day, but you have those experiences. And, you know, we help each other out in the military, and you remember that, and you know, it stays with you.
Yes.
Now I have civilian friends, one that I've known for 40 years, he's my best friend, and then I have my military friends. So they're like pretty much on the same level as far as, you know, but it's just different experiences, a different understanding of life, our life in the military versus my life with my best friend of 40 years as a civilian. So, you know, you take that with you. You just remember all those times. And, you know, a lot of us, you know, if you've been in for 20 years, you went in pretty much, you know, not as a baby, but you what did you know at 18, 19 years old? you grow into it. And when you retire at 39, 40, it's like that's been your adult life experience. And so that's the bulk of what you know. And then, you know, you add that to what you know outside the military, and you remember, while I was growing up, I spent time with this sailor, this Marine, this airman, this soldier. And, you know, through technology now, it's a good thing because you can reconnect more so than, you know, somebody coming out of 30s, 40s, 50s, or whatever.
And then just following up with some of those big lessons that you carry, you know, that you learn through the military, and maybe that you think that everybody, even if they're not military, everybody should be this way as we were in the military, because it would just really set them up for more success. Anything like that.
One of the things, like for me, is financial stability. In schools, they really don't teach you that. So here you are, 18 years old, you're leaving mommy and daddy's house for the first time, and you're off to serve the, you know, the country. You have no idea what to do with your finances. Like, I think we need a better way of teaching finances to our youth, so that when they are outside the nest, they grow and they, you know, prosper. So financial education is something that I'm still not perfect with, but going back to like Cherie Ham, always throwing books, tips, you know, all kinds of tricks at me, and then those tricks, those books, those ideas, I pass down to my airmen. You know, so financial stability, being on time, like scheduling, like trying to be proactive with your life. Don't let life just happen to you. I find myself like I'm still 15 minutes early for all appointments. Well, now that I'm a mom, that's sometimes not accurate. Um, so I find myself also still carrying things in my left hand so that I can salute, because we
Right.
always salute with our right hand. So you couldn't carry stuff in your right hand because, you know, I know some people that still fold their socks and do their laundry and do all the stuff the same way that the military taught us. Um, but just, I would say, like, some of the biggest life lessons was the financial stability and being proactive in your own life, not just letting it happen to you. Don't just sit around, you know, get up, ask questions. You don't be afraid to speak up, you know. So those are some of the biggest life lessons that I had. And sorry, as you're climbing up the ladder, reach down and grab somebody else, because nothing is going to change. You may make a change for that moment of time in that section, but if you don't bring somebody in and help teach them that change, it's never going to build and foster and then grow into maybe that big idea that you have. So as you're climbing up the ladder, grab somebody and pull them up with you.
Michael, for you, any lessons?
Everything that Paula said, the financial stability, you know, we had to learn this in the military. So like I said, we became adults in the military. So, you know, the financial learning how to finance, you know, and I mean, I admit I give a lot of credit to my wife, you know, choosing the right partner. But yeah, that financial stability, you do learn that. Patience. We've been in situations now. I haven't been in situation like Paula spoke up earlier in, you know, Iraq, you know, but you're in the military. There's always going to be somebody who just don't like you, whether it's here or whatever country you're stationed in, or countries that you visit. You know, people protest sometimes, so they'll look at you funny. You got to keep your head on a swivel. So when you hear about some of the things that go on in civilian life, and not poking fun at them, but it's like, okay, you know, it could be worse, you know, so you're patient about some things, you're more calm about some things that go on. All right, so that's a lesson that I learned. She spoke of the habits, you know, holding stuff in your left hand so you can sleep. It took me a long time to get over the whole you where you're stationed, sometimes you can't walk in the grass. Like if you're in uniform, you don't walk in grass. It's just a thing that you don't do. You walk on the sidewalks and that's it. You know, when I go to Fort Meade, you know, in front of their exchange, they have their exchange is like their Walmart type of, it's an activity. So it's like the mall for military folks. You know, you just don't walk in the grass. There's no real need to, but you know, they got sidewalks there. You use the sidewalks. You don't walk in grass. It's just something that we learned in boot camp. And it took me a long time to kind of get over that, you know. Just little things that you did. Marching with people, you know, walking in step with them. I still do that with my daughter when we go for walks. It's crazy. It's just habits. Folding your clothes a certain way, trying to conserve space, being on ships. You only have like a rack, you lift your rack up and you only have a certain amount of space. You're not going to bring big, heavy stuff out. So you just try to compact things and put them in a certain areas, just little things like that. And as far as impact, she said helping somebody along, paying it forward, that type of thing. Always remember that while you're going through something, somebody else may be going through something a lot worse.
Yes.
And if you can intervene, you know, you got to choose your battles, of course. But if you can intervene, do it. Do it. And little things like talking to people. Like before I joined the military, I was a little hesitant to ask questions of somebody, I don't know, whether it's in a mall or in, you know, in whatever store. If I had a question, it's always, I wonder about this, I wonder about that. You know, I'm more forward with saying, hey, you know, what do I do here? What do I do there? That type of thing. You just kind of step forward and, you know, get the information that you need. And I learned that from the military, really. Because as a civilian, you kind of hold things in and, you know, try to figure things out for yourself sometimes. But sometimes if somebody's in front of you, know the answer. Hey, What do you do? That type of thing.
Sounds like discipline, awareness,
Yes.
self-awareness, but
Yes.
also
Yeah.
awareness about your surroundings. I mean, the fact you're talking about not walking on the grass and
Yeah.
I mean, that's, even looking at the environment, right? And being cautious and protective of the environment. Empathy, it's another big
Yeah.
word that I could use for everything that I just heard you guys say. So there's a lot of big lessons that I love that you guys are bringing and impacting, veterans, their families, and everybody else around you here at Howard Community College.
Mhm.
Paula, we haven't really talked about, your role and what you do here at Howard Community College, and I think it's really important to make sure that we talk about that. So tell us a little bit about the Student Veteran Organization.
Thank you. The Student Veteran Organization, like I mentioned before, is a way for like-minded people to come together. Some of the military, whether they're active duty or retired, we still have a sense to serve. So what the Student Veteran Organization does, what we do is we try to uh, do events like volunteering around the community, events on campus, helping out other clubs like theater club or something like that, if the opportunity presents itself, to still serve and help other people. One of the biggest things is we advocate for veterans on campus through the student government hierarchy. So, through the student government agency, the student council, like all of that. Any issues that the veterans need, we go as students and advocate for those needs. And we volunteer. I mentioned volunteer, but we also fundraise. We would like to. I would like to have like shirts, like in the military. One of the big things right now is wear red on Fridays, and it's a way to show our support for those that are deployed. I'd love to do something like that for the campus, but unfortunately, right now because of COVID, I think people are Zoom fatigued, COVID fatigued. Like the participation is very extremely minimal. But we're still there. We're still, open ears and a voice for any veteran or military affiliate. Um, if you have a concern, if you have any issues, come to us. We're more than happy to help. We have a Facebook page. We have through Canvas, we have our own course, I guess you could say, because when you're enrolled in classes, you have its cubes for each of your courses. So we have one for the Veteran Affairs where discussions happen, announcements happen. Griggs and Melissa, they're constantly posting stuff. Recently, we had something about a resume workshop or job fairs, just things like that we do to actually, help veterans get to where they need, whether it's financially, education, even personally. If you're having issues with, maybe PTSD, you just need to talk to somebody. We're there for that as well.
Sounds like a safe place.
Yes.
To just keep that spirit and keep everybody together and just come, like you said earlier, in a relaxed way, in that atmosphere where that people are going to understand where you're coming from because they also have that same shared
Yeah.
history, that same shared background. For people who are listening right now and watching, where can they connect with you guys? Where can they find more information? Michael, maybe let's start with you. Where can they go to see all of the benefits and read up and email, call, whatever best way there is right now to connect?
Well, in the office now, so email or call. My email address is mgriggs, mgriggs, at howardcc.edu. Phone number is 443-518-4514. I'm in the RCF building, Rouse Company Foundation, room 233. That's Records Registration and Veterans Affairs. And
And if they wanted to connect with you?
So we have two different ways. I put them in the chat. I don't know how this works with the Facebook Live or whatever, but the Facebook page is the HCC Student Veterans Organization. You have to be a registered student to join. If you are also on campus, you can contact us through Canvas. But also my HCC email is Paula, paula.rojas, ROJAS, at howardcc.edu. And anyone that, is listening can contact me through my email. And then those that are actual registered students on campus, they can actually find my personal cell phone number in Canvas.
A question that's itching in the back of my mind, just because I've heard, that in the military you wake up really, really, really early, is and I think it's kind of like a fun way maybe to finish our conversation today. But what time did you used to get up when you guys were serving?
So for me, we used to have PT every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 a.m. So if you know DMV traffic, you have to be 15 minutes early. So I would get up at 4:30 in the
Wow.
morning, take care of my dog, make sure I had all my uniform, everything like that, because, you got to shower at the gym, and, nobody lives really close. So, I'm not going to commute all the way back home to change and come all the way back. So I would get up 4:30 in the morning, make sure I had everything, roll out, be at the gym, 6:40, 6:45, PT, shower, and then get to work. But now that I'm a mom, I'm getting up retired. I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning, making breakfast, making lunch, getting the little one up, getting her ready and getting her off to daycare. And, if my husband's home, taking care of him, maybe making him breakfast or something like that. So for me, it didn't really change.
Right, just an hour difference. Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Michael? How did that translate, from serving?
First of all, she said she was in the Air Force, and this whole Monday, Wednesday, Friday PT stuff. I don't know if I, believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the times vary.
Yeah.
I was a shift worker. I was a day worker. When you flew, it just varied. Depending on the mission. It'll dictate when you. I've woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, 1 o'clock. You want to say that? 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. If you're lucky and get to work in a day shop, you go to work at 7 o'clock, so you're getting up at 6 o'clock. And now the PT thing, they do that in the Navy as well.
Mm-hmm.
You get up at 6 o'clock, get up at 6 o'clock, and do that about 6:30, 6:45, that type of thing. So the times they just varied. I can't tell you, depending on where I was stationed. Like I said, 3, 4, 5. The latest probably, well, for a night shift, 4 in the evening, but that's different. The latest for a regular day, it's probably about 6:30 is the very latest. And people who wake up that late to go to work, they're lucky, So, but the times varied. It's just too.
Yeah.
That question comes from this idea that we have from like Hollywood, right? Where you see that it's 5 and you see like the trumpet go off and everybody get up at the same time. So that's the image that I have, and that's where that question's coming from. Another question that comes from just from from those images that the media sells us is and you kind of mentioned marching together, but also chanting, right? Like
Yes.
Screaming out loud. Are there any favorite chants, anything that you guys remember, something that you still hold dear to your heart?
When we were going through convoy training, we had to go do a basic combat convoy course in Camp Bullis, Texas. Every time we went, and we, they took a bunch of us from multiple bases and brought us together, and we had to do a lot of this. We had to learn, tactics and stuff like that. But then it was also a huge team building. We, come together as teams. So we would join up in formation at the end of the day. And my fire team, my crew, whenever it was right before we were dismissed, one of the guys screamed out, "Red Robin," and all of us down the road went, "Yum." And like the whole camp just busted out laughing.
Wow.
But some of the chants that we said while we were marching, probably can't say on Facebook Live, but it was all about just coming together and having humor in what we're doing. Like, who really wants to do a 7-mile ruck march with however much weight in San Antonio, Texas heat, full battle rattle? Who really wants to do that? So yeah, the chants definitely help take your mind to a different place and help push you through those particular situations. And yes, that happens in the Air Force, Griggs.
Yeah, right. Nah, when she said the ones that you can't mention, that's why I'm laughing over here, because I know what she's talking about. I'm not gonna mention any, but yeah, some of them it's just like, you know, no, no. Um, Chance. I mean, sometimes when you're running and you're chanting, and after about 2-3 miles, it's cool. And Hollywood, like you said, makes you look really cool, and you get a little chill bumps and everything. But sometimes, like with y'all can be quiet
Shut
now.
the heck up.
Yeah,
Can we just get through this? Shut up.
we're in the third mile of this 5-mile thing that you want to do. Yeah, but some of them, like at the end. All right, here's one. At the end of boot camp, and that was 32 years ago. The running and the chanting and all that, because y'all motivated to get out of this environment where people are yelling at you and making you do push-ups because you fold your pants wrong. Of course you're going to be motivated to sing whatever chants. It's just a lot more. Yeah, we about to leave this place and this is cool, so yeah, everybody yelling, screaming, those types of things. Yeah, but once you get all settled in, you're at your first command and not beating you up for folding your pants wrong, or saying the general order wrong or something like that. It's like, okay, yeah, the chants were cool, and what we do right here is cool, but sometimes we can give it a rest. But
I love
it's
that.
all dependent upon your environment and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. The last question that I have, and again, it's all coming, based on Hollywood. You see the picture of the food, and you just see some kind of porridge just pouring down, and it's like something that you do not want to try. It's just something that does not look tasty at all, right? Is that the reality of the food? The armed forces, how's the food?
Personally, in basic training, that's probably what you thought because that was the only option you had.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, I don't think it was that bad. I don't. But then I was Air Force, so we're like Club Med of the branches. But also, like in a deployment location, when we were in Iraq, some of them it really depended on the camp you went to. Some of the Marine chow halls, man, they really threw down. Like you can get homemade waffles, and I mean, just the taste, like it was just amazing. Some other camps, the Army, kick butt took names. I had the privilege of going to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and we were a multicultural camp, and you had the Kiwis and the Spaniards, and like, all right, today's day you eat at this camp or this camp or this camp because it was just what they had. So yeah, Hollywood paints a very bad picture, but that's why we do so much PT, because we do eat well.
Yeah. Well, she already mentioned about the Air Force facilities. I've been to them. Outstanding. I was never in an Air Force boot camp, so I can't speak on that. Navy boot camp, like she said, yeah, it's slop here, eat that. It's not like that. I mean, it's not like a 5-star restaurant, but you're in boot camp. Their mission is different. It's not to, feed you, ribs and seafood and just, it wasn't morale that way. It's okay. What can we do to get these people through boot camp? Certain amount of protein and this and that and that and this. And it wasn't all bad. I don't think I've been to a really, really bad military facility where they just fed you slop. it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm out in the fields. You took your own stuff, and like I said, it wasn't 5 stars. Just to get you through the day, to get you, from point A to point B. And I mean, Paula knows more about that than I do. That's Hollywood. It's funny. It's funny looking at it.
And thank you for helping us really, understand that the reality is different from what we see on the movies, because it is important to really get to understand how it really is compared to what the images that we see on television. It's 11 o'clock. We're just there. I think it's a beautiful way to end this conversation today. Just reminding everybody to go to howardcc.edu. You can just type on the search bar Veteran Affairs, and that's going to bring you up to all of the information that's going to put you in touch with the Office of Veteran Affairs. You can find Paula's information that way as well. And you can connect and you can continue that camaraderie. You can continue, you can find that community that's right here in Howard Community College. I thank you both so much for sharing your stories, your perspective, for bringing. It was so clear to me, and I hope that it translated. I have the privilege of seeing the three screens here, so maybe everybody who's watching missed some of the reactions that the other person was having as the other person was speaking, but that's, to me it's very clear that there's an appreciation, there's a love, there's a respect,
Yes.
very deep,
Yeah.
from both of you guys, and that comes from your background, from having been in the armed forces. And I thank you for bringing that and for really showing us and sharing that with everybody this morning. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap our conversation up today?
I would like to thank everybody at the on the HCC campus, from advisings, admissions, the RVA team, the step up coaches, the professors, all the way up to the president of HCC. Thank you for taking care of our vets. When I was doing my homework to figure out which school to go to, HCC made me feel like a person and not just a number. So I really appreciate that. And thank you for doing everything you can to take care of our vets, because I really see it.
Thank you to RSVO president. Me and Paul, we do this all the time, just going back and forth and giving each other crap. But I mean, there's a high level of respect
Yes.
for the SVO president. Very motivated, just a good person. Thank you to her. Thank you to the students. Thank you to the staff. I love this job. It's great. I love the school. And happy Veterans Day to all the veterans and veterans families today.
Happy Veterans Day, brothers and sisters.
All right.
Absolutely. And if you're out there, and I love when I see somebody who has a uniform, just take some time today and always really to honor them and thank them for their service, because as we've heard, it might not be as bad as Hollywood paints it, but the sacrifice is still really
Yes.
big. It's still very large, as Paul and Mike just told us this morning. So thank you both again for joining. Thank you everybody for listening and watching. Share this with your friends, share this with your family. Reach out to Howard Community College, see how we can help you if you're a veteran, if you are somebody who is can benefit. Maybe you have a family member who is in active duty. There might be benefits here for you. So make that call, reach out. We're here to help you. Enjoy today. Have a beautiful Wednesday. Thank you for your service. We honor you. We see you. And I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate what you guys all do.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
thank you guys.
Thank you.